Hello, and welcome back to Wine Grants, unscripted chat about the unfunded, the official podcast of the Unfunded List. I'm Dave Moss of the Moss Family Foundation, and with me this week is Esther Pinnock, enjoying a fine dry Vino Verde with me, one of my favorites. Please say hello, Esther.
Hello.
It's great to have you here in the booth. And as I'm sure you're aware, because we just discussed it, I'll be reading your bio out loud now. Esther has several years' experience in the nonprofit sector, having served as executive director of Citizens Advice Bureau in the island nation of Jamaica. She holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Media and Communication from the University of the West Indies in Mona. Esther previously worked as a public relations officer with the Jamaica Information Service, JIS, the public relations arm of the government of Jamaica. Esther has also involved herself in youth leadership and community development in voluntary capacities in local community-based organizations. Esther's passionate about empowering citizens through information and education. She is working towards an MBA in social entrepreneurship and aims to create a synthesis between development communication and entrepreneurship that will dismantle abject poverty and its effects throughout her sphere of influence. Currently, Esther is serving in Washington, D.C. as an Atlas Corps Fellow, which is a unique international exchange program. Great. Impressive bio. You're doing cool stuff, and you're from Jamaica. I think you may be the first, I'd have to go back and check, but you may be the first non-American we've had here in the booth for Wine Grants, so welcome. I hope that.
Interesting. It's always good to be the first at something good.
Yeah, sure. No, and it's we've only done a few episodes, and we are here in America, so not by design. Also, it is true that especially on the funder side, the vast majority of philanthropic organizations and funders are located here. So I do expect most of our guests to at least be be from here, at least be living here, because the booth itself is, as you know, here in DC. In fact, the reason you've been able to join us is because you're currently here on a year-long fellowship program. Full disclosure to everybody, I used to work at Atlas Corps, so I know a little bit about what it does. Been a while. But since you're currently serving there and you're currently a fellow, something I was never an Atlas Corps fellow, just worked there. Could you go ahead and start us off by talking about the program? Tell us what brings you here to DC.
Sure, definitely. Atlas Corps is one of those unique experiences. It's focused on bringing together young nonprofit leaders from all over the world here in DC to exchange, to express their abilities in serving the nonprofit sector here in DC. And I have the privilege of serving inside Atlas Corps, and it is a fantastic, it's a growing entity. We're reaching, currently we have hosted over 350 fellows.
Really?
Right, from
wow, it's been a lot since I was there.
72 different countries.
I remember when we placed our 100th. I was working there when we placed our 100th fellow.
Wow, that must have been amazing.
And you've now placed over 350.
Over 350.
Wow.
Yeah, right.
Outstanding.
Yeah, and as you know, Atlas Corps now partners with the U.S. State Department to offer the EAGLY Atlas Corps Fellowship.
EAGLY?
Yes, the Emerging Global Leaders.
Emerging Global Leaders. Yes. What's the I?
Initiative.
Right. EAGLY.
Yes.
Great.
And I am a part of the first batch of fellows to benefit from that program.
Ah,
yep.
I see.
Indeed, and it's a great honor. The experience is really mind transforming. It's an enriching experience meeting, persons from various continents. It's the world together in one place.
Mm-hmm.
And
so just for folks who may be hearing about Atlas Corps for the first time. This operates very much like a Peace Corps, but in the reverse direction. Right?
Yes.
And Scott would always caution me against saying reverse Peace Corps. It sounds like your goal is war, right? Which is not the goal of Atlas Corps. But it's a Peace Corps, the type program that goes in the opposite direction.
Right.
The Peace Corps, of course, sends young, bright Americans abroad to volunteer for a year. It's a wonderfully successful program launched by John F. Kennedy, one of our of all the presidents we had. He had the nicest hair, and he also he launched. And I think there's really little dispute on the hair front there. I mean, there's a couple other guys who had interesting hair, but in terms of quality, right? I think Kennedy's got them all beat.
He might just lose that status. You have some nice options.
Yeah,
on the table.
And some folks who don't have particularly nice hair. But yes, many of the people running have great hair. It's funny you mentioned one of my favorite quotes, and it's actually somewhat relevant. Is from one of the candidates who's running. You may have heard of her. Her name's Hillary Clinton.
I've heard of her.
She's one of the many folks running for president, and they say she's got a pretty good chance. This is not a political show, but one of my favorite Hillary quotes. She said a long time ago while she was first lady, "Always pay attention to your hair, because everyone else will."
Okay.
Right? And I think, she's been, of all the people up there, she's had the media and folks talk about her hair more than the rest of them combined, right? And it's not always, if you're trying to be in a position of where you're publicly recognized, right? And you've worked in public relations and things like that, communications, you understand. It's not always like you're not doing this just for vanity, right? If she were to go out on that stage with her hair all messed up, looking terrible, that's the only thing people would talk about.
Yes.
And so her hair has to look good so that they'll talk about the substance of what she's saying. Right? And I think that's, for nonprofits who are seeking funding, there's a lesson to be learned there, right?
Definitely.
Right? Your program could be solid on all its fronts, but you got to have things like brand and logo and a message, because you don't want that to be a distraction.
Your packaging needs to be up to par.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, impressive.
Mm-hmm. So the back to Atlas Corps, it works in the opposite direction. Talented folks from all over the world, they come to the U.S. and they volunteer at nonprofits for the year. And the program is funded partially by state, partially by private donors. The Moss Family Foundation has contributed in the past. Nothing compared to what the State Department does. But what I like about it is it doesn't really follow this older model of nonprofits where we raise a ton of money and then we give the money away. At Atlas Corps, there's an earned revenue model. The host organizations, they get to benefit from a full-time fellow like yourself for a full year, right? And they pay a cost share. I believe the cost share is now $35,000.
That's what it is.
I just recently read a study. The value of a full-time volunteer for the year is way higher than that. More like $60,000-$70,000. And it's a really great deal for folks who are looking to staff up, add incredible talent to their teams. And in fact, the average Atlas Corps fellow, I believe, has quite a bit more experience than a Peace Corps fellow. Peace Corps folks tend to be a little bit younger. And you are, in fact, probably one of the younger Atlas Corps fellows, I think.
No.
No? Oh, no. Okay. Well, you don't need to say how old you are. But I figure you can't be older. You can't be much older than 21. So I figured, you were probably one of the younger.
That's very flattering.
But I believe the average fellow has 6, 7, 8 years of experience. Most have advanced degrees, master's degrees. Some have higher.
So an Atlas Corps fellow must have a minimum of a bachelor's degree and at least 2 years of experience in the nonprofit sector, right?
And there have been 350 of them from. Do you happen to know how many countries? It must be
72.
From 72 different countries. Jamaica is one of them. Lots of folks from.
We've had folks
all
from
of the
Latin
continents.
America, from all across Africa. We've had European
India,
fellows.
China,
Currently,
Korea.
we brought in our first Azerbaijan.
No.
No, it's not first.
Well, no, she might. It gets tricky sometimes. It's hard to tell where someone's from.
It's true,
right? Because are you from where you were born? Right. I remember. Oh no, I don't want to get her name wrong. But there was a fellow. She had been born in Baku. but she was a citizen of Russia when we placed her. So
Yeah.
is she Azeri? Anyway, doesn't really matter, right?
But we have them from all over, and that's the essence.
From all over, a variety of skills, and like if you're, especially if if you have a program that focuses abroad, or not, you're just looking to bring some good quality talent onto your team, and different perspectives too. I think that's people who come from a different worldview often have unique and interesting things to offer, which is part of the reason why we're happy to have you here in the booth today to talk about Atlas Corps and also just in general to talk about the funding universe. So I'd love to know what it looks like for a young social entrepreneur in Jamaica who has a program, right? And Jamaica, I think a lot of Americans might think of it as a resort destination, right? Which it is. I believe you have tourism,
yes.
but there are also problems in Jamaica as well, right? Just like anywhere.
In fact, one of the most times I mention that I'm from Jamaica, I get the response, "Oh, I want to go there," right? Of course, we invite people
Sandals, I believe, is the.
Yeah. Jamaica is, our doors are open, so we welcome all who want to visit Jamaica. But yes, we do have our challenges, and among them, is the issue of poverty. Yes, and it dovetails into our crime issues. But now is the time when it's really ripe. Jamaica is now embracing social entrepreneurship, and the non-profit sector is encountering some restructuring of the laws and all of that. So our non-profit sector is really being empowered to take on the future and to address these issues of poverty, right? And of course, it's there are entities there who are very supportive of our non-profit sector.
Excellent. Now, when we were speaking before, there was a Jamaican expression about innovation. I forget exactly how it went. The roads being crooked.
Yeah, we are a very resilient people. And coming from our history, we have this phrase, we turn pon crooked and cut straight. So we are accustomed to staying on a crooked path and innovating ways and means of survival so we can end up on a smooth path. And that is a big part of the Jamaican philosophy.
Could you say the expression again?
Turn pon crooked and cut straight.
Turn pon crooked and cut straight?
Yes.
More or less?
Yes. You've got it.
I love it. I think it's really important. I think it's something that at certain times in American history that we understood very well, I think, as a culture, and I think it may be something that we have perhaps a little, to at least to some extent, lost sight of. And particularly in the nonprofit sector, I think there's lots of folks out there who are trying to navigate through very, very crooked systems, and who don't necessarily always stop to think about, well, how could I, what's the straighter, what possible more sense, because when you're a social entrepreneur, you've got so many different things that you have to think about, right? Especially when you're, in the beginning, when you might just be a one woman or one man operation. You've got to do literally all of the things. When you start working in the areas that you may not understand as well, you may be convinced that you have to follow these very crooked paths, right? And that very often may be how I think for a lot of folks that's fundraising, right? And they'll go and they'll ask people who know how to fundraise, and they'll ask how to do that.
Yes.
Or they'll go look at the foundation. They'll go look at the foundation's website and look at the front page and read about how that, or they'll read one of the many terrible articles that have been written about how to apply for foundation funding, and they'll try to do it the way that everybody else does it, or they'll try to raise money the way that some of the older nonprofits raise money, right? Like I have made fun of the dinosaurs on occasion. These older nonprofits whose mission was basically, and this was a model that worked very well in yesteryear, right? When there was much less access to information for folks, right? For instance, so I am a Jew, and I'm going to the Jewish Federation General Assembly in about a week here, and Federation is one of those older models that made a whole lot of sense. So for Jews in a community that wanted to support the Jewish community, they couldn't possibly know all the different ways to do that, right? They wouldn't know what's going on in Israel. They wouldn't know, what's going on, at all the various Jewish programs and day schools and stuff. There's just no way that they could know all that information, right?
Interesting.
So they trusted Federation to raise money for the Jewish community and support all of the Jewish causes, right? So for a long time, Jews that did their giving, they just donated to Federation and then trusted that Federation produced reports showing, the impact of their stuff, right? I think the newer generation, Federation is doing a good job adapting, right? But they need to move on from that older model because there's a lot more access to information. If I care specifically about one Jewish cause, right?
Yes.
I can very easily find out which nonprofit's doing great work on that specific cause and donate directly to them. There's a thousand others outside the Jewish community. There's many examples of that. Basically, just we're going to raise a ton of money by being really good fundraisers, and then we will decide how that money gets dispersed. Right? And there's some problems with that. One, it does lead to corruption sometimes, whether that's intentional corruption or just accidental bureaucratic corruption. Right? And it's just a weird set of incentives. So you have this business, right, whose job is to fundraise. Right, and they need more and more funds. There's never enough funds, and so they become a little fundraising operation around a good cause, and it becomes, to me, a little bit weird, right? That's a long rant from Dave, which regular listeners to the podcast are used to hearing. But I think that's wonderful advice. Can you tell me a little bit about what you were doing back in Jamaica before you joined the fellowship?
In Jamaica, I served as executive director at Citizens Advice Bureau.
Mm-hmm. So were you just giving citizens?
That's recently for the past 3.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So were you just giving citizens advice?
Largely, because
I just picture you in an office, right? And like maybe they come in, they take a number, and then they're like, "Can I have some advice, please?"
There's a walk-in, and we
this was a walk-in.
Fielded calls too. There were a number of calls.
Okay.
What we realized that many Jamaicans, in as much as we have our public service organizations that are there for social security, and they are unaware of the opportunities that exist. They're unaware of how to solve particular problems.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah, so we were like that refuge for them. They'd come with the questions and we give advice. Sometimes we had experts like legal advisors come in and share with them, help them to fill out forms, etc. It was a very rewarding experience.
Focused mostly on navigating the bureaucracy of Jamaica's government, which I'm sure pales in comparison to the bureaucracy that we have.
Well, that's arguable.
Really?
It is arguable.
Really?
Maybe you just have it on a larger scale.
Yeah, no, it must be on a larger scale. So I doubt even you would agree with me, but I feel like it's probably more convoluted as well. We've got some real complicated and needlessly confusing stuff here.
Well, in our experience, we might have you go to one entity and they say, oh, you should have gone to that branch, and we have persons going around in circles, sometimes not fully understanding how and where and whom to speak to, and so it is sometimes frustrating, and we help them to navigate that space.
Our very first guest on Wine Grants was a guy named Matthew Lesko, who a lot of people call the question mark man, because he walks around town he wears very nice suits that have question marks all over them. He used to be on a number of infomercials, and he published a bunch of books. And when I asked him why question marks, right? One, he thinks it's a cool symbol. He was pretty clear that he just thinks it's a cool looking. The question mark is one of the cooler looking pieces of punctuation we have. It's more interesting than a comma, right?
We had a guy in my class in high school whose name was Mark, and a set of us who just like to question mark. So we were called question mark.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. That's great. But when I asked him why the question mark, why had he adopted that as a symbol, so he was very, I think the two of you would get along. He's very interested in, the average citizen's pursuit of information, right?
Yes.
They want to know something, how do they get that information, right? He's been around a long time. He actually got a master's in information services back in the 70s before there was the internet, right? So this was about how to navigate like bureaucracy before you could just Google it.
Right.
You know, the library, right? Card catalogs, things of that nature. And one of the things he came up with is, you know, even, you know, especially now that the internet's around, but even before that, the information is abundant, right? Your answer's there. Answers are very easy to find, right?
Yes.
Well, the thing that's difficult to find out is what is your right question, right? Right? So a lot of nonprofits are like, my question is like, how do I get more money to run my program?
Yeah.
Right? That's a question, right? It's not really the right, you know, you need to ask a lot. I think you need to find out, you need to spend more time before you can access the right information to answer that question. You need to spend a little bit more time on the question forming side, right? And like, you know,
Definitely.
and take a look at where at possible funding sources and ask questions about those. What's answers, once you've got the right question, answers come pretty easy this day and age, right?
That is true. That is true.
And you know, I think he's an interesting person. I recommend. You know, now that you've been a guest, maybe go back and listen to that episode because you know he had some pretty interesting things to say and I think you'd be.
I can imagine. I
interested
will.
to hear
I'll
about
check it
that.
out.
So you're there. You're helping citizens. Was this a government program? The Citizens Advice Bureau?
No, it's an NGO actually, modeled after Citizens Advice Bureau in the UK.
Okay.
Right. That's where we got
The UK. They were the ones
Yes.
that they founded us originally, and then we kicked them out.
Not quite. We emulated.
I mean, like historically, I mean, like they were the one they colonized, and we
Yeah, that's true.
Something happened at Yorktown.
Right. Right. So, you know, it's very vibrant in the UK, and we have adopted the model, and it's the organization.
They also
is
have some
40
pretty impressive bureaucracy over there, as I understand. But apparently they've got a citizens
Is
advice
there
bureau.
a place without the bureaucracies?
Perhaps somewhere, right?
That
There's a
should
couple
be
countries.
our mission.
There are a couple countries out there that don't have functioning governments at the moment, so they probably don't have a whole lot of. Right? So, you know, it's a give and take, right?
Yes.
So, as an NGO, how are you? Where are your funding sources? How are you fundraising over there in Jamaica?
Okay, so sometimes it's all right. We many NGOs, depending on their mandate, will get a subvention from the government. Okay, and we also have an umbrella body for NGOs in Jamaica, which is called it partners with. Why is the name slipping from me now?
Partners with something.
Okay, let's just continue. I'll get back to it, right? But
yeah, what does this umbrella organization do?
It's like a body of all the NGOs in Jamaica. Most are signed up with it, and it does offer funding for particular projects.
Where do they get their funding?
Oh, they have very creative ways and means.
Oh.
Because they're so large, they attract funding from USAID and other international entities, as well as they have a creative way of soliciting. We have the CFC here in the US. They reach out to government entities for, to encourage individual giving. And they disperse those funds to various causes.
Is there a lot of individual giving in Jamaica?
I'd say yes. Jamaicans are inclined to support causes, the ones especially that touch the emotions. Like if somebody is sick and dying, yes, they'll support it. And we find that also if persons identify with a particular cause, they'll give faithfully. Retirees are often willing to give, and of course, persons will also bequeath funds to organizations that they favor. Yeah, that's true.
Do you have the foundations? Are there any Jamaican foundations?
Definitely. Our banks have foundations.
Yeah.
Our largest cell phone service provider, Digicel, I was just talking about them today. They have a foundation that supports the charitable giving as well as social entrepreneurship in the country. And the name of the organization has just come back to me. It's
great.
the Council of Voluntary Social Services.
The Council of Voluntary Social Services. How could you ever have forgotten that?
How could I? maybe I needed some more wine.
Yeah, perhaps. I think that is what solved that problem. That's very interesting. And so, what with all that you had going on, you're running this interesting small nonprofit in the beautiful island nation of Jamaica. What could possibly cause you to want to come here to Washington D.C. Spend a year here? What were you looking to get out of that experience?
Definitely a view of the world. Yeah. There's a song, "The Bear Went Over the Mountain to See What He Could See." Well,
Yes, I've heard that.
So, it was quite fulfilling to be serving my clients. But then when you get into a routine of doing certain things in a certain way, you start to wonder, is there something more? Is there another narrative that I should be exposed to? Is there another methodology? And of course, that is what pulled me here. And I'm not disappointed.
Great. Well, neither am I. This is, I think, a great opportunity to segue into our close. But right before we do, though, give you one last chance to have your say. Having now had the experience of running a small NGO in Jamaica, and now serving at a small nonprofit here in the U.S., and also being able to network with several other folks working at nonprofits. What would be your best general piece of advice to fund seekers out there, people who have a solution to social entrepreneurs, people who have a solution to a problem and who need resources to do it? What would be the general advice that you would give to someone now that the bear has climbed up the mountain and seen what she has seen? What does she have to say?
It's a very relevant and good question that you have asked. Of course, I have the vantage point of the Jamaican experience and coming here and seeing how nonprofits operate. And I think once you're confident in your product, once you're confident that you have a solution to a particular problem, be bold in making it known, right? Once you have that buy-in, then it's easy to attract support. And that is one thing that I've learned. Two, be organized about it, be bold in presenting it, and documenting is critical because that is how you will attract your funders. It's, what I realize here, nonprofits here are very noisy. We are not that noisy in Jamaica. And I think there's value in making noise.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You're doing something good, make it known.
That's nice to hear. As someone who's spent his entire life having people to tell him to be more quiet, I think you're really right. I think you should be bold. I think you should be organized, and I think you should be noisy.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Esther, for coming by. As always, I want to thank our host, the Lookout DC, which is a beautiful co-working community for filmmakers located in the Adams Morgan neighborhood of Washington, D.C. Thank you, everybody, and good luck with your funding.